Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the British-Norwegian Chamber of Commerce's first event of 2021. This is first part of 3 fantastic events that we have lined up this year, or this spring. This is the first, the Future of Foods. It'll shortly be followed by the Brexit, the first 100 days, later this month. And following on from that, in April, we will be having an interesting event talking about the national cryptocurrencies. All 3 have stellar lineups. All 3 are super interesting. So I'm sure you're going to have a super event today. I would ask that you go onto our website, bncc.no, and sign up for the other 2. And with that, I'm going to pass you over to our more than capable moderator, Ellen. That's right. And I hope you have a thoroughly entertaining hour and a half. After that, thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you very much. The future of foods. The world's population will increase by about 25% over the next 30 years. That means that we need to produce a lot more food. But at the same time, the way we now produce food is not sustainable. So, how we produce food needs to change. This will mean that a lot of companies needs to change how they operate, but it also means a whole lot of new opportunities. In this webinar today, we have an amazing lineup of speakers that will bring 4 different perspectives on the future of foods. The world consists of about 70% water, 30% land. Still, only about 2% of the food we eat comes from the ocean. Now, if you look at games like Farmville, you find it on Facebook, maybe your friends are playing it. It's teaching our kids that food is produced in fields and in barns. However, the future of food might very well be on the sea. We will now hear from a supplier of more traditional technologies, Offshore Industry, that has changed their perspectives. They have turned around and are now delivering to the food industry. Let me introduce, in a very short time, Eva Helene Rognskog, who's the CEO of Satpos. She's sleeping, thinking, eating seaweed. But first, let's have a very short movie.
The world's oceans currently only provide a tiny fraction of the planet's food. But limited land resources mean that farming the ocean may be essential if we're to meet our ever-growing demand for food and animal feed. Seaweed farming could satisfy part of that demand, which is why I've come to Frøya on Norway's west coast.
Welcome to Frøya.
Thank you. Jon Funderud is taking me to a 19-hectare kelp farm. The company that runs it was founded in 2009 and aims to provide sustainable food, animal feed, bioplastics and biofuels. But our first stop is on the nearby coast to take a closer look at the farm's source material.
That's part of a large kelp species, which is the fast-growing large brown seaweeds, which we grow out of the farm. It's nice and salty.
Mother plants like those on the rocks are collected and brought back to the lab where they can produce millions of new seeds. When we get to the farm itself, they're sowing seeds back into the water, attached to these ropes.
We'll just leave them here for another 4 to 7 months before we harvest them in springtime. We're going to go back and harvest them in about April, May, and they will reach the size of almost 2 meters in length.
This footage, taken from a previous harvest, shows how quickly the seeds grow. Next spring's harvest will yield about 150 tons of seaweed, about half the total volume harvested in Norway. Globally, commercial cultivation of seaweed amounts to around 30 million tons, and Asian producers account for about 97% of that. The industry is only in its infancy in Europe, but Jon strongly believes that should change.
We're talking about a plant that grows faster than any land plant. Seaweed doesn't need any feed. There's no fertilizer, no pesticides, no freshwater media, no land use. So it's very resource efficient production and as sustainable as food production can get.
The Norwegian government has given farming licenses to around 100 sites. But for the industry to grow significantly, what's already a relatively costly production process would need to expand to offshore locations.
Myself and my brother John, the founders of Sapos, we come from a tiny island in the mid-west coast of Norway that is surrounded with oceans. And our legacy comes from our father's company that was founded in the mid-90s. And he developed and innovated ocean technology for this marine seismic industry. Now, that is where we come from and the legacy that we have towards what we are doing now as well in the ocean space. And what we see is that our legacy is still as strong as it was and as it is today in terms of being a part of the ocean. So everything that we know and everything that we've developed is for the ocean and in the ocean. And one of the harshest environments on Earth for making something work is the ocean itself. Now, we say that we come from the marine seismic industry, really, and we do, and we still produce products for that industry. And that is a part of the oil industry. However, though, we have to look at the, in terms of the polarization that we are talking about, in terms of the green transition, the pride that we take in the legacy for the oil and gas industry. And the very reason why we can accelerate as fast as we can towards the green transition is merely because of the offshore technology and expertise that we have gained through the oil industry. Yeah.
So, Eva,
Yes.
what is your grand dream for your company?
My grand dream for the company. Well, one of the grand dreams for Sapos, because we do sensing and positioning and monitoring of the ocean, and that's where we come from. It is that every single buoy in the entire world would be intelligent. And the reason for that is because we then can detect more of the ocean, we can learn more of the ocean, and we can also harvest more of the ocean resources. So I hope that within 10 years, that every single part of the ocean would be mapped, would be understood, and that we can harvest more from the ocean and also learn about the environment and the climate changes that we are facing as well.
Now, I come from the AI industry and I find everything that has to do with data very interesting. But first, what would you say are the key learnings from the seismic industry that you bring with you to food production?
Well, one of the key learnings from the seismic industry is the technology development itself. So everything that we learned from the very early age and the foundation of Norway, the legacy of Norway as an oil and gas industry or oil and gas country, comes to do with innovating new technology that survives ocean conditions for offshore and subsea. And we've succeeded on doing that for the oil and gas industry, which is the harshest environments. And then by implementing that into new areas, greener areas, we can do that because of that experience. And for our part in Sapos, we do have the experience from the offshore, and now we are going into a fantastic seaweed transition that we could not have done as quickly if it wasn't for the offshore experience.
I find your enthusiasm for seaweed very, very fascinating. Could you maybe tell me a little bit more about seaweed? Because I
Yes.
literally don't really know much. Can I eat it?
Yes, of course you can eat it. Now, seaweed is one of the fastest growing crops on the planet. I'm just going to show you here. In the ocean. And it needs no feed, no fertilizer, no pesticides, and no fresh water. So there's basically it's a fantastic source of vitamins and minerals that you can harvest from the ocean. But it's so underutilized, especially in Europe. So 95 or 97% of all seaweed production is actually in Asia. So we want to scale up the seaweed production or the seaweed industry in Europe and globally because of the lack of food and the lack of feed. But also because seaweed has so many fantastic benefits to it. It absorbs carbon or CO2. So that is part of helping out the climate. So seaweed is an ocean rainforest. It's a fantastic contributor to restoring the climate. So the more seaweed that we can produce, the better it is for the climate, and the climate changes. So that's a very important thing. The other thing is that seaweed is also used for, when scaled up, as a protein, extract as a protein. So it's a great protein for seaweed, for seafood. And the other part is that seaweed is also used for replacement of plastics. So one great thing is that, as an example, a company called Nopla in London. In the London Marathon in, I think it was 2018 or 2019, they had these pouches, these plastic pouches with Gatorade at the marathon. So they just popped that. And then they ate it. They ate the plastic with the Gatorade. And that plastic was made out of seaweed.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, I think for the sake of our audience, when you talk about food and feed, food for humans, feed for animals.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's an important point.
It is an important point.
But when you talked about how you use your solution for seaweed, it would be interesting to hear a little bit more about what you actually do in those intelligent buoys.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the, when we were introduced to seaweed, it was actually a year ago, and we were approached by a seaweed farmer in Norway that had lost their buoys. Now, seaweed is a massive farm consistent with, it could be hundreds of buoys, and ropes attached between the buoys. Yeah. So that's the farm, and then it's anchored. But they've lost the buoys, so they had no means of finding them. So we made a positioning system with a battery that they could pop on the buoy. And then we started to investigate, well, what is seaweed? Because we didn't know much about it, really. And it turns out that it's one of the most amazing resources in the ocean. And seaweed needs nutrition. It grows in certain places where it has good nutrition and certain temperatures. So in order for them to understand whereabouts to place the farm, they would need information about the environment of the ocean. So there you have a sensing unit. But the processes were very manual. It's exactly the same thing that happened, what we believe and what we see, happened 15, 20 years ago with the fish farming industry. Everyone had their own little place around around the coast. But nothing was streamlined, nothing was automized at all. And we see the exact same thing happening here. So by implementing technology that we do, which is merely just a part of the value chain, mind you, but an important part, we can reduce the manual labor, we can optimize the production, and we can reduce the risks and keep control of the quality. So what we are making is merely an environmental monitoring of the farm. So you can detect and predict with analytics what future changes would happen to the farm and the state of the farm itself. So there are many benefits, but yeah, I could go all day.
We could spend just one webinar
Yes.
only on you.
Yes.
So that's the next one.
Yeah, that's the next one. Yeah.
Are there other types of productions where one could easily apply the same technology?
Yes. The technology that we've made itself is basically, if you think about it from a very simple point of view, what we have is a low-cost sensing and communication unit. So when people ask me, well, what do you do? Well, we make positioning, sensing, and communication units, and they're lost. Most of them are lost. So in order for me to explain to them what we do is that if you look at a buoy, and you see the buoy as a body, human body, as a shell, right, floating in the ocean, then you have our topside unit, which you put on the buoy, which has a processing unit. So it thinks a bit, does some processing. And it has battery, and it communicates. So that's your brain, and that's your voice, right? That's your head, really. And then you pop on the sensing units that you have below the surface. Everything from 2 meters to 30 meters below the surface. And that can taste the salinity, the pH, so that's how we taste. That can sense the temperature, so that's our way of sensing. And that can see through our eyes. So it's and that application is merely just a tool for understanding the state of the ocean. And that is very much applied to every place in the ocean for farming or for environmental purposes. So, yeah.
You talk a lot about the harsh conditions of the Norwegian ocean areas.
Yeah.
But of course, this is not just applicable to the Norwegian coast.
No, it's not. It's applicable to everywhere in the ocean because you need to detect, ocean data management is applicable to the ocean, which is 70% of our planet. So everywhere you have ocean, you can utilize the system and put it into a system that can analyze it in order to understand more of the ocean environment. And that could be for, as I mentioned, environmental purposes or for harvesting or site assessments. So there are many, many reasons for it.
So there are actually many reasons why our audience should actually contact you on LinkedIn or give you a call and ask more about your technology. Because you could work with much more than just seaweed.
Yes, but we find seaweed to be such an important and amazing resource that we are giving this a boost with our technology.
I think this is really great. But you are a startup.
Yes.
In a way.
In
Although
a way,
you
yes.
have a long history within the seismic industry, but within the new era of food production, you're kind of a startup.
Yeah.
I work a lot with startups across many regions of the world, and what I see very often is that these startups struggle to grow outside the national borders. But what I hear about you is that you are everywhere.
Yes.
So could you give some advice to other tech startups in Norway and Britain for how to get out there?
Well, it's you can say for the high precision positioning units that we have for geological surveys, they are all international. Very little in Norway, so that's what we know. But it's all about daring to ask and daring to have ambitions, because if you only do the tiniest bits and you always work locally, you'll never get anywhere. So you have to have ambitions and you have to dare to ask, and that's what we do. We're out there. Yeah.
Daring to have ambitions.
Yeah.
I think that's a great statement, and I think that's a great final to your part of the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So now let's move back on land. Now, future of food is of course not just about the ocean. It's also about what happens on land. Artificial intelligence has been a hot topic for the last few years, and there are a lot of use cases within food as well. But very often it's a bit the use cases are a bit high fly, or we don't really believe them, or they're a bit hard to do. But now we're going to listen to a use case that is really fascinating. Yara International, they started in 1905 as a producer of mineral fertilizer. Now they have a long history of supporting farmers around the world in increasing their production, and hence they're also an important part of the current food challenge, because the mineral fertilizers give us more food. However, there are also some sustainability challenges to this, actually two. First of all, if you use too much fertilizer, that's a challenge to the environment around the fields. But there's also a lot of energy going into the production of the mineral fertilizers. So, because of the important role that Yara has in the future of food, I would now like to introduce Pål Øystein Stormarken. He's Vice President, Farm and Ecosystems and Partnerships. All yours.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I want to draw your attention to what Yara do for realizing the future of sustainable food. And first of all, I would like to show a video telling a little bit about our journey.
Mineral fertilizer has saved more lives than any other invention that mankind has created. The story of Yara is incredible. It's about the fusion of the most basic elements that nature has given us. We use nitrogen from the air, salts from ancient seas and oceans, and phosphate rock from the ground. These are the natural raw materials that make up Yara's mineral fertilizer. Yara was born in 1905 by great minds and great people. And today, half of the world's population is fed using food grown with mineral fertilizer. Yara's business is all about the farmer. Farmers need to ensure that the soil is healthy, that it has the right nutrients in it, and that it's sustainable. And it matters because by 2050, the world will have 9 billion people. We need 60% more food, but we cannot produce more emissions. The problems that the world is facing are bigger than just one company. We have to reach across boundaries to solve these things. We've done that throughout our history, and today is no exception. For Yara, it's about bringing people together, feeding the world, and looking after the planet.
From our side, I would like to highlight what kind of journey Yara as a company have taken from 1905 up until today. We are at present headquarters in Oslo, about 16,000 people, and we are operating in 65 countries with offices, and we deliver our products to about 140 countries worldwide. So we are a truly global company coming out of the Norwegian domestic market 115, 16 years ago. We have had a journey where we typically was as a normal peer producer of mineral fertilizer, going step by step over time, taking care of the innovation that we were born out of in 1905 with the innovation of the extraction of nitrogen from the air, and now coming over to become not a producer company anymore of fertilizer, but a crop nutrition company moving also into climate neutral solutions. And if we compare ourselves with our competitors in the fertilizer business, we have a completely different value proposition to the food market than our peers. It's always a situation today where you have to evaluate if you want to continue doing what you're doing or if you actively pursue changes. And I think from our perspective, the only thing that is for sure is that you need to change. And change is probably the most normal thing in this world. We need to adapt to COVID and we need to run our global operation in spite of that challenge. And that's also tell us something about the opportunities that an organization like ours actually have to take on new opportunities. We know that from the legislations of using fertilizer in the global world will be that we will see countries and regions where this will be reduced. And of course that will have an impact to our business if we are not doing anything. We will have also, of course, from a financial point of view, problem to maintaining our knowledge premiums because of this, that the volume go down, and that means it will be more a harder competition on the product itself. We are looking at sustainability and transparency as a natural part of our contribution to the food industry. We can be, by using our digital tools, we can be able to help the farmers to produce more with less. That means also that we can take down the carbon footprint of each field, because at the end of the day, this is about each field. It's not about an aggregated, but we need to concentrate on individual fields. Digital tools give us the opportunity to handle each field individually in a way that we can help each farmer to optimize what they are doing in their individual fields. We are also looking carefully into how we are producing our fertilizer. Originally, when we looked at the development of Yara, we were using electricity from the Norwegian hydropower grid to produce the fertilizer. We went over to gas because that was a cheaper feedstock. Now, with the hydrogen economy and also the opportunity to produce green ammonia, we are now back to the utilizing of renewable sources for also our fertilizer. We also see that the data world is coming very strongly to us because we are driving our digital tools driven by purpose. That means also we get access to more quality data, and we see opportunities to create more new services from the data that help both the farmer to add more value to the data from their area, but also helping the food companies to know more about what kind of food they actually get supplied from their producers. And this is also creating an opportunity for us to do new business models where maybe the farmer for the last 50 years have been buying their fertilizer product per ton or per kilo. Maybe tomorrow they will buy based on the outcome that they are able to produce using our services and also our core products. We are and we believe it strongly that to do all these changes need not only physical infrastructure, but it needs also the core strengths from the organization. I think people have been to the top of mind in Yara for more or less as long as we can remember, and we are more and more a value, vision and mission driven company that really believes that we can do a change But we cannot do this alone, so we need to work together not only with our own people, but also people from other organizations. With this history from 1905, of course, our knowledge bank is massive, not only for producing the fertilizer, but also how to apply the fertilizer and how to produce more with less. We have over time built also a very strong connection to farmers. I mean, we have, as a part of our organization, more than 1,000 agronomists that on a daily basis are in connecting with thousands of farmers, and also adding our digital tools that is now multiplying this to millions. And as I said in the beginning, we have a global footprint. That means that we have an infrastructure upstream to really drive something into the green ammonia side and hydrogen economy, at the same time taking a strong position when we are talking about the ingredients of improved sustainability on the food side. So we will see a business model driven by the core competence and the competitive edge of Yara, both on the upstream side, enabling ourselves to go into a hydrogen economy. We have the infrastructure. Of course, this is dependent on that governments and other industry verticals are actively participating, because this is a heavy lifting. But I mean, Yara launched just a few months back that we want, for example, to convert our fertilizer plant in Porsgrunn, Norway, into a 100% green ammonia plant, with, according to our CEO, with a time span of 5 to 7 years that we can be able to obtain. We will also, and I think it was said in this press release, that you can compare it with when Ekofisk was discovered from the oil industry here. And the main driver is, of course, for going over into this green economy, is that you also have offtake agreement, not necessarily only related to the fertilizer production, but also into other industrial verticals, like, for example, a new type of fuels for the maritime industry, because the positive thing with ammonia is that it have a 4 to 5 times higher energy efficiency than, for example, only hydrogen. So that's on the upstream side. On the food or the farmer to food side, as I said, we are developing services that is helping, based on the data that we are working together with the farmers, to get better information to the food companies about how the crops is grown, and what kind of carbon footprint it has, what is the water use efficiency, what is the nutrient efficiency, so consumers going forward can be more safe and think that, okay, the food I'm eating have a high nutrient value, because that is the core of what we are doing. As more nutrients into the crop, more nutrition for the food, for the people. So that is a very logic way for us to develop ourselves. So this is, of course, a critical thing for our transformation, and we believe that if we are just maintained the way we have been doing today, we will probably be much smaller and not as interesting for our shareholders as compared to if we now go into this transformation that is required both from a consumer perspective but also from Yara as an industry leader.
Thank you very much. Now, first of all, that is really an impressive change journey that Yara has been on. And what you're pointing to is that this is not about technology, it is really about humans and culture. Mm-hmm. And then the technology is just an enabler. But still, coming from the AI domain, mm-hmm. I am of course curious about the project that you have, or the initiative that you have with IBM, First of all, I'm really impressed actually that you talk about the change that Yara has done without talking about the tech. But I know that the tech part is an important enabler here.
Yep.
So could you perhaps share a few perspectives and thoughts on the role of technology and also the collaboration with IBM to achieve this?
Yeah, I think that what is interesting with the tech here is that when I'm talking about the changes to a green economy upstream, that is based on an already existing infrastructure. We have the ammonia plants, we have the vessels, we have the storage tanks, etc. So it's more a question about changing from gas to a renewable energy source. When you come to the food side, and the data side, we do not have that infrastructure. So that means that we need to use cooperation with tech, because we need to build a similar infrastructure. So let's say when we have a ammonia plant close to a fertilizer plant, you can always do it easy. But at the same time, if you want to really get use of the data and create value on the data of data that the farmers own, you need to have a data platform that have the capabilities of handling this data in a good way. So that's one aspect that we are focusing a lot on, building a back-end infrastructure, supporting our front-end digital solutions that the farmer can use.
And then, of course, when you apply technology to change your business model, it's always about the humans at the end of the chain. And how have you gone about making the technology an integral enabler that is just there, but they are still humans, and you've done it well. So what have you done to achieve that?
I think that I'm not an expert in this user experience and all that world, because that I'm coming from the traditional side, so I try to learn every day. What I know and what most of my colleagues know is the importance of building a solid backbone to what we are doing and enabling new competence to our company to really understand what is going to fit with the users. And of course, one of the challenges that we see in agriculture is that it's very fragmented. I mean, let's say 600 million farmers globally, 500 million of them is smallholder farmers in emerging markets, 100 in let's say professional farmers, and they're coming out of countries, regions, and they're producing maybe the same crop, but very often very different. And how do you tap into this? And I think that you see that startups try to drive small features within a small area. What we try to do is to try to come across a natural process of how to help. And that we can use our country-wise knowledge, that we can localize that user experience to really be attractive to the farmer, regardless if he's a smallholder farmer in Africa or in Asia, or a professional farmer in Europe, in North America, or in Brazil. So it is a challenging journey, but I think that's why the enablement of the backbone infrastructure is so important, because that's scalable.
That's a very interesting and important point, the fragmentation of the agricultural industry, that there are so many small units. In the aquaculture industry, you have bigger units, so it's a bit easier to collect the data for each individual farm. But within agriculture, it's not quite like that. And well, you talked a bit about the farmers. So what has their reception of your new way of working been?
I think that Yara have over time built up a very strong brand recognition. I think we have been seen as very solid, trustworthy. That means also when Yara comes out in the market with such solutions, the expectations from the users is high. And of course, that is also the challenge for us, that we may spoil our reputation by not fulfilling what we should. So quality aspect needs to be very much in focus. So what is coming out is really what we stand for. And I think also we are talking about the food chain, and the food chain is also a bit a result of a fragmented farming structure. So there are, I mean, we always talk about Nestle and Unilever and the big companies, but at the end of the day, don't forget 80% of the food in the world is still produced by the emerging markets. So there are as fragmented food topographical challenges as it is on the farmer side. So to run this transformation is about try to find out how to mitigate the fragmentation at all levels.
So how do you think Yara will continue this journey?
I think first of all we have a very solid base of what we are doing today, and of course that base will remain solid over time, because what we are doing both on the green upstream hydrogen side and also what we're doing to be really influencing the food side is in the long. So you need to build step by step. You need to be in this for long, and that's also why we are actively working with other companies in order to see that to lift this as Yara alone is not possible. We need to lift this together with others. So for example, the areas where we take it for granted is standardized in other industries. For example, farming is very limited standardized. So a farmer field doesn't have any standard in any GS1 world, while a food product is a standard. You know where it comes from, you know what it contains, everything. So all this needs to be worked on, and that needs and requires strong cooperation between companies.
And that's a challenging journey, definitely. Now, I have studied organic farming, so of course fertilizers to me is a bit, it hurts a bit, but still the fact is that the invention or the discovery of mineral fertilizers is probably the invention that has saved most lives in modern history.
Mm-hmm.
And that is food for thought.
Yeah.
Could you share a success story with us, or two if you want?
Success story. I mean, I think first of all, what Yara have been doing, or coming out of Norsk Hydro and becoming Yara, built up a position of a global company, have in itself been a success story. I mean, we have been influencing, like you say, with the mineral fertilizer, have a much higher impact, in fact, than vaccinations and penicillin and all these other important things. And I think also knowledge. I think the success of what we have been doing and what we are doing is the, let's say, the knowledge growth tag that we are using. Because I can relate it to when I was working in Africa for Yara, how much the knowledge part really was driving what we were doing, and that's really encouraging. I think that's really just an example of a day-to-day success for us working in Yara.
I think there's one really important thing you have pointed to, in addition to, of course, what Yara stands for, and that is that you actually learn every day. I think that's an important part to bring with us when we talk about the future of food, because there's so much more to do. Thank you very much for your contribution today.
Thank you.
Future of food, sustainability, requires a lot of change for a lot of companies. That's about people, it's about culture, it's about business models, and it's most definitely also about technology. But in this, there's also a whole lot of business opportunities. Now, of course, the interest of BNCC is to foster more business opportunities between Norway and Britain. And I think that's an important part to keep in mind when we talk about future of food, the legacy from offshore, and all the possibilities that we actually have because we have this legacy. Now, let's move back to the ocean. The annual export of fish from Norway is about 10 billion pounds per year. 10 billion pounds per year is a lot of money, and still it's only a mere fraction of our food consumption. Fish farming has been heavily and frequently criticized for lack of sustainability lately, actually over several years. At the same time, this industry has invested a lot into improving sustainability, into applying technologies, into the use of new technologies, but also into R&D on diseases, lice, feed, medication. Now, let's have a look at a company that have, in fact, done all this. They have invested heavily into R&D, and they are now a very forward-leaning tech company within fish production. Lars Fredrik Martinussen, he's head of communication of Nordlaks. Let's have a look.
Hi, my name is Lars Fredrik Martinussen. I'm the head of communication at Nordlaks. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to talk about aquaculture and how Nordlaks is going to play a role in the future of foods. Now, Nordlaks was first established in 1989 by our founder Inge Berg. Today, Nordlaks is still a family-owned aquaculture company. We are located in the northern region of Norway, and the picture you're looking at now is from our first farm back more than 30 years ago. As you can see, the production equipment was quite simple. Beneath the green plastic on the shore there, you can see the feed supply, which was carried by hand onto the small boat and then rowed onto the farm itself, where the feed was dispersed by hand. If we fast forward today, this is Nordlaks in 2021, and this picture is of our first ocean farm, which we received from the yard in the early summer of 2020. Now, we have taken the first steps out into more exposed waters, and we're currently doing the first experiences from producing salmon in our new ocean farm. So I will get back more into the details about the ocean farm itself, but first a little bit more about Nordlaks. We are the largest family-owned aquaculture company in Norway, currently producing about 40,000 tons of Atlantic salmon and rainbow trout every year. And we have big ambitions for the future and for the volumes to increase as well. We're employing 650 people and have a turnover of about 3 billion Norwegian kroner. We're an integrated company with activities all along the value chain of salmon farming, from broodstock to land-based production of stocking fish, transport of live fish between the land-based facilities and the farms, and of course between farms. And then we have the traditional aquaculture farms, and most recently also exposed aquaculture. And then also the last part of the value chain, which is post-processing and value-added products. And we are selling and marketing our own products, primarily in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. So that was a brief introduction to Nordlaks. But what does Nordlaks and salmon and aquaculture has to do with the future of foods? So this picture was taken nearly 50 years ago aboard Apollo 17. And of course, a lot have happened since then. And today the ambitions for sustainable development is better than ever. But this picture helped kick off the realization that we only have one planet, and helped raise the awareness about how we affect it and how we have to manage our footprint. So you're of course aware of the challenges at hand. How are we going to produce healthy, safe and delicious food for a growing and more prosperous population, and at the same time addressing the climate crisis, access to fresh water, and the fact that we still increase the use of the Earth's resources faster than the population growth. So it goes to show that this picture has at least some of the hints, some hints for some solutions, because it's a little weird that we call it Earth. 70% of our planet is covered by oceans, but just 5% of our foods come from the ocean. That makes for some big opportunities for aquaculture. Now, the international community do have ambitions for sustainably managing and increasing the ocean's share of our food supply, including aquaculture. And for instance, the Color Fair Index, which ranks the major global protein producers in the world by 10 different ESG factors, they conclude that aquaculture companies are among the most sustainable protein producers in the world today. But still, why is salmon farming part of the solution? And it's because of these guys. They are fantastic livestock. Salmon have large roe and robust fry. They can eat dry food right from the start. The production process is relatively straightforward. Also, fish and Atlantic salmon is weightless in water, and they are cold-blooded. So they don't waste any energy on standing upright or producing heat. So they're very efficient in converting feed to edible food. So done the right way, aquaculture represents climate-friendly and resource-efficient food production. And also, of course, consumers are in demand for affordable, convenient, healthy, and increasingly also environmentally friendly food. So I believe salmon ticks the boxes. And that brings us on to what challenges do we see ahead for developing this industry. So a lot can be said about aquaculture and sustainability, and in 10 minutes I will have to focus. So I'll talk most about one of the primary challenges for the future development of aquaculture in Norway, and that's the question about where the production will take place. This map, the red dots represent salmon farms and where they have been located over all these years. It's the inner coastal zone and the protected coastal zone of Norway. And that space is getting occupied, taking into consideration that we need areas for traditional fisheries, for leisure activities, for transport, and also making space for wild salmon, and keeping a safe distance between the farms. It's evident that we have to be able to utilize new areas of our coast and develop aquaculture in new ways. And that's why we built the ocean farm. This thing is 385 meters long, it's 60 meters wide, and can hold up to 10,000 tons of Atlantic salmon. It resembles a ship more than an aquaculture farm. That's because it's built to protect the fish at the exposed location that we're using, and of course to provide a safe platform for our crew. It's anchored in the front of the construction, so we can rotate on the location to adapt to the weather and so forth. So it's in operation at the most exposed location for fish farming today in Norway. And it's an important first step for us to be able to utilize more of the Norwegian coast for food production. And as we speak, the first production cycle in our ocean farm is coming to an end. The fish is reaching market size, and we're going to start harvesting it in just a few weeks. And during this coming spring, we will then be able to say exactly how both the ocean farm and the fish performed. And we will know even more about how to make this work even better going forward. And we have plans for the future, for future ocean farms as well. The second one which is not in production and still not being built, but it's in the planning stages. And this is an ocean farm which will be dynamic, meaning it can relocate between locations depending on the weather or the time of year, and will make it possible to utilize even more of the coastal zone for aquaculture. So going forward, we believe in a combination between land-based production and increasing the size of the fish we produce on land before putting it into the sea, and then a smarter use of the traditional farms, and in combination with the last step where we move the fish onto the more exposed location in ocean farm. So by developing the production method, we believe we're taking new steps in improving our production and reducing our environmental footprint, and also being a competitive salmon producer. But it doesn't stop there. Our ambition is to improve all along our value chain, and to make use of and to develop new technology and new production methods in order to further develop the company and of course the aquaculture industry. That includes new and more climate-friendly transport of live fish between farms and to the post-processing facilities, and of course transport of products. So we invest also in increased land-based production capacity in exposed fish farms, in also semi-closed fish farms. That is a new project that we announced just weeks ago. But to us, this is also about local development. We think it's important to being able to offer valuable and interesting jobs and job opportunities in this region of Norway, which is already experiencing the effects of urbanization and population decline. So aquaculture not only represents opportunities for the future of foods, but we believe also represents a future for Northern Norway and our communities. So we are quite proud to be part of a company which is willing and able to participate in creating the future of aquaculture, and by doing that also the future of foods. And I must say we're quite lucky to be doing it in perhaps the most beautiful part of the world. Thank you very much.
Our final speaker in this webinar is Ida Espalin Johnson. She's a partner at the law firm Hovin. She's also the co-head of the practice area Aquaculture and Fisheries, and she advises the industry on business law, administrative law, dispute resolution. I also checked her background, and I know that she's been working with pensions and in the financial industry. So I think it's fair to say that Ida has always been working with securing our future. Now, Ida, what is your summary of what you've heard so far?
Oh, I think it has been very, very interesting to listen to both Yara, Satpas and Nolax. And as all the speakers have held out, we are becoming more and more people on this earth, and we need food, not only to survive. Good food makes us more intelligent and less aggressive, and that can of course be an advantage if we are becoming 9 billion people. And of course it is very important that we do not destroy the planet in our attempt to make food for all of the people. So it's obvious that we need a more sustainable production of food. And it has been very interesting and impressive to listen to how the speakers so far work on this project. And we in Hovin, we're very proud to host this webinar and to have these guests and to listen to them today. I mean, sustainability has become a very natural part of our everyday life, actually. So, I mean, recycling, reuse, reducing waste, it's like it's just something we do. It goes without saying. And it has also reached our legal systems. And one of the latest examples is the EU green taxonomy, where institutional investors like pension funds, where I am engaged, we have to declare and to explain how our investments actually impacts on the sustainability and the development. And this, of course, does something with the way where we invest our money, and how who actually gets our money. And that again have an impact on our production and how we produce things, what we produce, what we buy and what we use, what we eat, not least. And it does something about our behavior and how we behave. And I think we all need to continue to change the way we think and the way we work in order to meet this growing demand for sustainable behavior.
Now, you said good food makes us more intelligent and less aggressive. Now, that's an argument I'm going to use every evening from now on.
My children use that on me, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Get something to eat.
A brilliant argument, actually. Hovin works a lot in this space. What would be some of the typical challenges within food and sustainability that you work with?
Well, in my experience, the aquaculture industry works very, very serious with their impact and reducing their impact and footprint, and to find and reach more sustainable methods of farming. And in that connection, there is a lot of testing of new technology, and of course then they need agreements, they need approvals from the food safety authorities, for instance, in order to try out new methods, because fish welfare and animal welfare is also an important part of sustainable food production. And so we have a lot of challenges in that area. We have worked a lot with the Norwegian development licenses that were given, or not given, but they were sold quite cheap from the government to farmers who were planning and achieving projects for sustainable or more sustainable and green farming. And that involved, of course, applications, joint ventures and cooperation agreements, IP regulation, of course, because there is a lot of development of IP, construction of various installations, different permits, for instance, to actually put the fish into these new constructions, etc., etc. And Nolax is an example. The ocean farm was is a result of these development licenses. And of course, when you look at Nolax and the moving of farming offshore, new questions arise. I mean, can you just put your installation anywhere? Do you need a permit? Who is allowed to put their installations where? It applies, of course, for the ocean farm, but also for other installations like windmills, wave energy plants, solar energy plants, and you need new regulation. And in these areas, the regulation is in the making. So it can be kind of confusing to find out what to do, but it is also an opportunity to have an impact and to influence on the regulation. So I think these are one. Well, of course, what Yara also mentioned about new technology and artificial intelligence, it's a key factor, and that also raises lots of questions concerning data privacy, data security. We have had several malicious attacks in Norway in the aquaculture industry, actually, lately. So I think we meet challenges all along the sustainability chain, actually. And of course, everything needs to be financed. So,
oh yeah, that brings in another area of challenges as well.
Yeah.
Eva from Satpos, she talked a little bit about the legacy from the offshore industry. And I find that a really interesting perspective, that the legacy we have from offshore is not just bad. We have a lot of interesting and useful learning. But from a legal perspective, what would you say are some of the key learnings from our offshore legacy when we look at food production and sustainability?
Well, I think Satpos is a very good example, how they can reuse technology in new ways and even develop it further. When it comes to the legal or regulatory matters, I think maybe the way we have divided the North Sea in order for oil companies to exploit the oil and gas that we have, maybe we will do the same when it comes to farming, offshore farming. Maybe we will do the same when it comes to other energy sources that we can exploit or from the sea. I also think that when it comes to construction, we have a legal framework within the oil supplies industry that we can reuse, at least to a large extent, with standard agreements, etc. And I also think that within the health, security and environment sector, there is a lot to reuse when we move offshore with other or new industries.
Now we're going to come back to the topic of offshore fish farms. But first, let's touch upon the topic of the business landscape. Of course, one of the hosts here is the British-Norwegian Chamber of Commerce. What do you find are some of the typical issues in the business landscape for this industry?
You mean between Norway and UK, or
yeah, both between
yes.
Norway and UK and the world in general, but of course, in particular, Norway and the UK.
In the UK, well, then of course Brexit is it's I don't know, it's the ghost, the big ghost. We have in Norway and Britain have very different legal systems. But grace to the EEA regulation, it was actually easy to have trade and to enter into agreements. And of course Brexit might change that. So we really do not know yet. We have some letters, I think, between the governments in the UK and Norway, and we have some grace periods. But we have also experienced that British food transport have been stopped because it has to be controlled as if it was from a third party or a third country. Food safety becomes an issue as it hasn't been before. And I think the situation is unsurveyable actually at the moment. So I think I should refer to my more experienced colleagues.
What would you recommend potential clients to be a bit proactive about when it comes to Brexit?
Oh, I think you just need to try and orient yourself in the landscape, and I think you need to contact maybe the foreign departments and your trade organizations. To ask and to find out what is the picture right now, particularly with food, because it gets ruined if you if you can't sell it. But right now, I think it's easier to sell Norwegian food and export from Norway to Britain than the other way. But I think that we need to get some solutions, and we don't have very good time. So hopefully the politicians are negotiating as we speak in order to get hold of this.
Let's go back to fish farming for a little while. Now, for the sake of the audience, could you, from your perspective and with your words, explain the benefits of putting the fish in a farm and take it way into the ocean instead of keeping it closer to land?
Well, I think the movie from Nordlaks actually explained it quite well, because there are quite a lot of fish farms in Norway right now. And well, we have conflicts between people who need these spaces for other purposes. We have conflicts with people who are afraid of pollution. We have the lice problems, we have diseases. And of course, if we can spread this out, it would be very, very advantageous, I think. We need more space, and I think it's necessary to do this to have a possibility to grow and to produce more fish, and maybe even other species. You know, today it's salmon that we produce in Norway, but of course we have all the possibilities to produce other species as we learn. Cod has become a new product, and it's possible actually to breed it now. It has been difficult before. So I think that is one of the great advantages. The difficulty is, of course, the rough weather conditions and the waves. But Nordlaks and the Hav Farm has been successful so far, and we have other installations as well. So I think that will be part of the future for not only Norwegian farming, but for other countries as well. I mean, you can put this farm anywhere.
I know lawyers are careful with predicting the future, but still, the big $1 billion or pound question is the future of fish farming on land or ocean-based?
That's a very difficult question, of course. But I think at least in Norway it will be based in sea. And I mean, if you just consider the fact that on this planet we have 70% sea and 30% land, and the land is already populated by people and other animal, and a fish farm actually needs quite some space. And then I think it's more obvious that the future is at sea than at land. But I think that fish farming onshore will also grow, because it is possible.
Pure statistics, basically.
Yes.
So in this landscape of new technologies and new players within aquaculture, energy production, all the vendors within the offshore industry, basically, there are a lot of startups, but there are also some corporates. I work a lot in the startup space, and I see that many of them struggle with navigating within all these topics of IP rights, patents, trade confidentiality and secrets. So what would your advice be to these technology companies and R&D companies?
Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of startups experience that they actually invent something very smart, and suddenly their idea is stolen from them. So I think my first advice would be to contact a good IP lawyer and consider very carefully if you should try and get the patent, or if you should try and protect your IP in another way. And if you really go for the patent path, which can be quite complicated, you should also have a very good patent attorney who cooperates very closely and very well with your patent lawyer. And the best advice, I think, is you should never enter into an agreement concerning your IP without consulting a lawyer. It's so easy to lose it, and it's so valuable.
So that's the advice of the day.
Yeah, I think so.
So, but to that, is there something else you would add as like a summarizing advice to the audience?
Oh, I think I would like to add something to what Stormarken from Yara said about cooperating. I think it's extremely important, and if we are to develop sustainable production, not only of food but of everything, I think we need to cooperate a lot more, and I think we need to be open to new technologies. And I think that established corporates, they need to help new biz and startups, and I think we have to be more open than we are today, to avoid these Kodak moments, right?
Yes.
Because the development goes so fast, and it's global, and it's impossible for one enterprise to follow everything and to do everything by themselves. So we need to be open. We need to open up, and we need to be global in our development and our views, I think.
Ida, thank you very much. I think that was a very insightful and experienced summary of your part of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, well, some of the things we've heard today is that legacy is not just bad, it's in fact good, because we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to keep in mind from what we have experienced, and that we can reuse for a better future. As Ida also summarized, we need to collaborate more. We need to collaborate across borders, beyond borders, across corporates and startups, across traditional industries. And that has to do with being open and curious, and also see opportunities where we maybe previously saw threats. And in the midst of this COVID pandemic, where many of us might be both depressed and frustrated about business going down or slowing down, or maybe not going where we wanted it to, I hope that this webinar also has been an inspiration for you, because I truly believe that within future of foods and the sustainability challenges we need to tackle, there are so many new opportunities for those who look for them and are willing to go for them. Thank you very much to the British-Norwegian Chamber of Commerce, the law firm Hovin, the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, for hosting this webinar and making this possible. Thank you very much to our excellent speakers, and please reach out to them, contact them, talk to them. There might be new opportunities, and connect with more people. Maybe there are also some new opportunities. We hope that this webinar has given you some food for thought, new perspectives, and inspiration. Take care and stay safe.